Good morning, dear students. Theories of wages, wage, labor, physical or mental work done for income is called labor. Labor is divided into two types, physical labor and mental labor. Wages are the reward for labor for their participation in the production process. Theories of wages. There are many theories of wages. Some of the important theories are substance theory of wages, standard living theory of wages, the wage fund theory, residual climate theory of wages, marginal productivity theory of wages, modern theory of wages. Subsistence theory of wages. This theory was propounded by physiocrats, the French economists, in 18th century. Later, the theory was developed by German historians. Later, David Ricardo made it a clear form. This theory is also known as iron law of wages. Some important points of subsistence theory of wages. Just as a price of commodity is equal to the cost of production, the wage of a worker must be equal to the minimum cost of producing labor. That is, it should only be a living wage. Hence, it is a subsistence wage. If wages are higher than the living wage, the economic condition of the workers will improve. Workers' marriages will take place, fertility will increase, the working population will increase, labor supply will increase, and wages will fall. If the wages are below the subsistence level, consequences such as marriages, illness, and starvation will occur, reducing the working population and reducing supply and increasing wages. In the long run, wages should not be higher or lower than the subsistence level. So, this is known as iron law of wages. The basis for this theory is Malthus population theory. The principle of every fruit of decay. Criticism on subsistence theory of wages. Malthusian population theory, which is basis for this theory, has been widely criticized. This theory does not discuss the differences in wages, changes in labor, productivity are not taken into account, labor demand was not taken into account, wage decision will not be discussed in short term. A frustrating theory for workers. Second theory, standard living theory of wages. There will be a of standard living that workers are accustomed to. The workers are using and accustomed to goods and services, comforts, luxuries. Standard of living also includes that. Workers' wages should be equal to their standard of living. This theory was developed by Terence. Standard living theory of main wages, main points. Terence transformed the Ricardo's concept of subsistence wage as a standard of living wage. The higher standard of living, the higher working capacity, and the higher their wage. Workers prefer higher offspring if wages are higher than the standard of living. So, the working population supply increases and wages fall. Workers reduce fertility if wages are lower than the standard of living. So, the working population and supply will decrease and wages will increase. Criticism on the theory. Standard living theory, standard of living does not determine the wages. Wages determine the standard of living. Does not explain the differences in wages. Wages have no direct or relative relation to the population. Labor demand was not taken into account. This does not apply in the short term or short run. Third theory, wage fund theory. The wage fund theory was propounded by J.S. Mill. Wage rate is we calculate wage rate is amount of wage fund by number of workers. Number of workers increase, the wages will decrease. If number of workers are 10, wage fund is 1 lakh. What is wage rate? Wage rate is equal to 1 lakh by 10, that is equal to 10,000 rupees. If the number of workers increase to 20, wage fund is 1 lakh. What is the wage rate? Wage rate is equal 1 lakh by 20 is equal 5,000. According to J.S. Mill, wage rate is fixed if the number of laborers increase, the wages will decrease. So there is inverse relationship or negative relationship between number of workers and wages. Wage fund theory is criticized widely. There is no specific wage fund at all. It does not take into account labor efficiency. Wages are determined in advance and then the wage fund is formed. This theory is favorable to the founders. This theory supports exploitation of labor, did not taken into account the factors affecting labor of demand and labor of supply. Wage fund does not constant, did not recognize the existence of trade unions. Next theory is residual claimant theory of wages. The theory was propounded by F.A. Walker, USA. The value of product is first paid to the rent for the land, interest for the capital, profit for the organization, and the rest to be paid as wages for labor. Criticism on this theory. Finally, all that left is profit or loss, not wages. Wage is a agreement takes place before appointment. This theory does not explain how trade unions can increase their wages. This theory does not explain the reasons for differences in wages. Although this theory took into account of labor demand, it did not take into account of labor supply. Modern theory of wages, labor demand, labor supply theory of wages. According to modern theory of wages, wage is determined by the demand of labor and supply of the labor. Demand of the labor is determined by the founders or organizers or entrepreneurs. Supply of the labor is determined by the workers. There is a inverse relationship between wages and demand of labor. There is a positive relationship between wages and supply of the labor. When the demand of labor and supply of labor are equal, the wage is determined. It is equilibrium wage. In this diagram, wages are increasing from 100 rupees to 500 rupees. The demand of labor decreasing from 50 to 10. When the wages increasing, supply of the labor also increasing. At the 300 wage rate, the demand of labor and supply of labor are equal. So the 300 rupees is equilibrium wage. This is explained through a diagram. In this diagram, labor supply and labor demand are shown on x-axis. Wages are shown on y-axis. DL curve is labor of demand curve. SL is supply of labor curve. These DL curve and SL curve are intersect at point E. At this stage, labor of demand and labor of supply are OM. Wage is determined as OW. In this in this stage, if the wage is determined artificially as OP1, the supply of labor is increased from OM to OM2, and demand for labor is decreased from OM to OM1. Here, supply of the labor is more than the demand of the labor. So, wages are decreased from OP1 to OP. If the wages are determined artificially as OP2, in this state, demand for wages is OM2 and supply of the labor is OM1. Here, demand of supply of the labor is less than the demand of the labor. So, wages are increased from OP to OP2 to OP. Changes in demand of labor. When the supply of labor is constant and changes happen in demand, if the demand of labor from increases, the wages are increased. The demand of labor decreases, the wages are also decreases or decrease. Changes in supply of labor. When the demand of labor is constant and supply of labor increases, the wages are decreased. If the supply of labor decreases, the wages will increased. These are the wage theories. Thank you.